Hello and welcome. My name is Shauna Campbell and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for WebAssign. And today we have a great panel of faculty and students here to really talk about building meaningful connections. We know many of you are transitioning back to the classroom. Maybe you went back to class in the spring semester and really are trying to connect with your students. So I'm very excited to have a panel of instructors and students. So we're really hoping everyone on this session can really provide a unique perspective and also give you the perspective from an instructor as well as a student. You'll have the chance to ask them questions using that Q&A button. So you can always bring up questions that you have for them specifically or anyone in general. So I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and share what they're looking forward to most this fall. So welcome all. I'll start with you, Sema.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sema Bualkhair. I am a business administration IT major at NC State in Raleigh, North Carolina. The thing I'm looking forward to most this fall is being a TA for the first time and being able to interact with my peers on a different level.
Awesome. Thank you. Ashley, would you like to go next?
Yes. Hi, my name is Ashley Lanise. I attend the University of Texas at El Paso. My major is political science with a minor in legal reasoning. And the thing I'm looking forward to most this fall is the cold weather because it gets hot here in Texas.
I can imagine. Jacob, would you like to go next?
Of course, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob Aguilar, Assistant Professor of Mathematics, Associate Director of the Honors Program at St. Leo University. What I'm looking forward to most this fall is finding a way to use and integrate all of these hard-earned new techniques from the pandemic in the past 2 years to the new classroom environment. It's going to be exciting, and I think definitely Cengage and WebAssign play a central role in that. And on a side note, normally in these type of webinars, I would give a quick fact about myself or side note. So I normally would say my hobby is cooking, and I have a deep passion for it. I watch cooking shows, and it's true. But I recently married a chef in June, and I found out that I'm horrible and not even okay. It's beyond horrible. So now my new hobby is dishwashing.
That is hilarious. I'm sure she makes some good food though.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. And Michael was not able to join us today. So last but not least, Dale.
Well, it's hard to follow Jacob's story, but my name is Dr. Dale Dawes. I work at the City University of New York. I'm an associate professor of mathematics. And I'm just looking forward to implementing everything I learned. You know, education is a process of continual learning. We have to refine our skills. So not just the students, but the instructors. So I learned from my colleagues, my peers. I learned from my students, and I want to get better every single semester.
That's awesome. I think we're always trying to improve, especially in the last year. We've had a lot of challenges that we're really working to overcome. So definitely learning. Awesome. So I'll go ahead and jump into it. So keeping in mind for you students, as you transition back to the classroom, something that us at Cengage and many of you have been hearing a lot is that while students are attending class, it's really hard to keep their attention and really keep them focused on the topics at hand. So I wanted to ask, do you have any suggestions for how instructors can connect better with students in the classroom? And any of you can start. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, I definitely think interacting with the students and having class discussions and maybe some class activities really help having the students interact and get their attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Sema, anything to add to that?
Yeah, something that I've always seen like in my progress with school is that whenever I have even the smallest memory of a teacher of interacting with them, whether that be remembering their zodiac sign or remembering what they like to drink in the mornings before class, whatever personal fact I know about them really leads me to listen to them more because they're more personalized to me, rather than being some sort of authoritative figure. I'm like, oh, they like the same coffee as me. You know, I'm more inclined to listen to them. And especially if they know my name, if I come up to them after class saying thank you or good afternoon, have a nice day afterwards. Oh, thanks, Sema. That's always kind of nice to know. I know that that's hard for teachers because a lot of classes have over 200 people in them, but maybe memorizing just 10% of those names could really help you because those students will then interact with other students in the class as well. And then therefore making even more personalized connections without you even trying. So
Yeah, I definitely think that you want to make sure that your students don't think you're a robot. You are sharing those little personal details. I know we don't want to get too personal, but just sharing little things about you. I think that's awesome. Dale and Jacob, any thoughts, from the faculty perspective? Have you seen this in your classroom, or any thoughts and strategies that you've used?
Do you want to go first, Dale, or you want?
Sure.
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
take it, Jacob.
All right.
So, absolutely, I'm gonna piggyback on what Sema and Ashley stated in terms of actually getting to know your students. That's why on the first day of class, I always try to do this is if I'm meeting face to face or if it's a synchronous class, I try to do some sort of icebreaker, some sort of opener. And then after the icebreaker, I tell my students, I did this on purpose. I want you to know that you have things in common. I want you to talk to each other. I want you to work with one another. That's how you get through this class together. And even for asynchronous classes, we always have a Blackboard post where you're introducing yourself. And it's not just your name and your major, but something interesting about yourself. Or since I teach mathematics, Jacob and I teach mathematics, how do you feel about mathematics? Why? Get that discussion started early on. And to pick up on what Ashley stated, and I'm not going to take too much time, I like to use games like Kahoot. So an interactive game to get my students to engage. And even some of the students that normally don't speak, when you give them a game, when you introduce competition, the gamification of education, you start to see a different level of response. Go ahead, Jacob.
Wow, that was okay. So Dell just basically hit every talking point I wanted to do, literally. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of piggyback on what Dell said and just continue on that. So I was thinking that it's the same stuff Dell was saying. We have to be more engaging and interactive. But I think that it even transcending students, anybody, if you give a group of people an incentive, they're more likely to be more engaged and interact. So that plays into the gamification stuff Dell was talking about with Kahoot and stuff. And so I was thinking maybe have a gamification day, once every 2 weeks, so we could just have break up the students in groups, and it could be coding groups. And you could have problem solving sessions, maybe 5 games or whatever. And the winner would get 10% increase on their test for each group. That would be a major incentive for people not to miss and engage. So, but that was wonderful, Dale. I could not have said it better. So let's just copy and paste what Dell said to me. And that's perfect.
Well, thank you, Jacob. But one point that I didn't mention that Jacob did is he talked about incentives. Yes, can I get the students to play in general? Sure, I can. But if I tell them that they're going to get bonus points, first of all, they get 100% just for participating. If you don't participate, you do not get 100%. But for maybe the top 5 students, they get bonus points. And that's what makes them want to engage even more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard a lot of group activities, getting to know your students and incorporating activities to give them a chance to get to know you. I know it's a little challenging in a big class, but when you can do that at scale, that's amazing. Before we moved on to the next question, so Michael was able to join us. So Michael, do you just want to share real quick where you're joining from, what school you go to, and what you're excited about this fall?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that, guys. I'm Michael. I go to NYU. I'm a junior. I play baseball there as well. I'm joining right now from West Palm Beach, Florida at my internship. And I'm most excited probably just to see my roommates again. We've been talking nonstop over text, but it's always different when we get to see each other. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially if you're spending your internship in Florida. You've been away for a little while. Awesome. Well, welcome. So changing gears a little bit, I know during COVID, everyone was teaching online, and we talked a lot about communication because, that was very challenging in an online environment. In terms of how much communication is too much and how to get your message across. So I wanted to ask our faculty partners on this call, what channels have been most effective to you to reach your students, and has those channels changed at all now that you're moving back to an in-class format?
You want me to go, Dale, or you want to trade it off? Okay, cool. Basically, I'm pretty sure we're going to say the same things. We've both been in the same situation, Dale and myself. But I think that in fact, communication is much better due to the pandemic. It's one positive that's come out of it because we have this online backbone for our course shell to communicate with students. They can look at it anytime they want. And it's just depending, for example, we use D2L at my university. So just keeping a good or well organized, not too busy, but concise, like course page, it really increases it. So you don't have to spam them because they're getting so many emails anyway. All of us are. So it's reducing that burden of emails, and it just makes it more clean. So I think communication has been better because of it, to be honest, at least in that respect.
Mhm.
So
For me, I find myself having to teach or model how my students should communicate. So I tell my students, and I learned this from my first boss, Christine. She says, people don't get disappointed in what happens. People get disappointed in what they expect to happen. So if my students are going to show up late for some sort of reason, I tell them from the first day, tell me, reach out to me. And I also have a Google Voice number in which they can text, not call, text. But and I get, which is easier for them to communicate with me than email. I let them save it in their phone immediately. So but it's not just giving them access to me, it's also telling them how to approach and modeling that behavior. Hey, professor, I had an emergency. I may miss class. So if you come to class 20 minutes late, I'm just happy that you're here because you control my expectation. Versus if you consistently come to class 20 or 30 minutes late, I just assume naturally that, oh, maybe you don't care about class or you don't care about punctuality, but maybe you have a family at home that you're taking care of, or maybe you are working 2 jobs. I don't know. But without knowing that from the beginning, without communicating that, then I wouldn't know. So I tell my students to control my expectations, and I model that by controlling their expectations. And for example, if a student was working 2 jobs and they tell me, professor, I'm always going to be 30 minutes late, what I'm going to say to them is, maybe this is not the right course for you. Not that you can't take or the time that we meet. There are other instructors teaching this same course. I can give you a recommendation and it can better fit with your schedule. And I want you to excel. So I'm not going to be offended if you move to another instructor's course if you can make that entire course. And I'm able to have those conversations once we communicate. But it's really about controlling expectations, not just giving access, like Jacob said, through LMSs, learning management systems like Blackboard, D2L, Canvas, Moodle, just to be clear about what I'm talking about. But it's not just giving them access to you, but it's also modeling how they should communicate with you and how they should approach you and doing the same with them in a manner that's respectful.
And that is an interesting way to communicate with your students too, because we all text, and that sometimes that is easier than jumping on email.
And so many students will text me, professor, Michael goes to NYU. So I'm from Brooklyn. I teach in the city at CUNY. So my students take the train all the time. They'll text me, professor, the train got stuck, or the train is delayed. I'm on my way. And just a little communication like that, I will forgive a lateness or it's no problem. And they feel better because, something that was out of their control, they were able to communicate with me. And I was able to demonstrate grace instead of just being, oh, well, you need to leave earlier or being too rigid. I think one thing that we learned over the pandemic is that we need to give each other grace. So, and it needs to be built into the course.
That's wonderful. Oh my God. That's like what Dale said is amazing. And that's true. I think that I learned the same thing. We need to be flexible. And also like the student like Dale was talking about, like maybe this course isn't right for you. From the pandemic, we've seen that some students, just a hybrid model is just fits their life better. It's a better product. So we kind of have a lot of different stuff happening from it that are positive, I think. That's interesting. But it's good you don't FaceTime though, Dale. That would be too much,
They try to call. I just say text. Call.
Yeah, it's text now, but like a couple years it's going to be called, then a couple years FaceTime, then eventually maybe so.
So for the students on the call, what do you think about that? What channels do you prefer your instructors reach out to you from?
I've really helped, like when professors help with their email, when they provide their email. I like how Dell said that they include their phone number. I've had a couple professors do that, and I appreciated that because it opens up the window of, hey, you can reach out to me whenever. Obviously not late hours, but you can reach out to me whenever. There's been professors that aren't very open on their communication, and when they really provide their phone number and email, it makes the students more comfortable to reaching out to them.
Absolutely. Sema, Michael?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of Ashley, I've always just been an email girl. I don't really, for some reason, I just don't feel like I could ever text my professor. I have done it only one time, and it was back when I was in high school. So it wasn't even for like a very like dire situation. I just thought that that was like their only method of communication because I was still pretty young and didn't understand how like college worked yet. But I'm just an email person. I have all my notifications on at all times for both my emails, and on my phone, I have the app so that I can just really quickly do it. And I have my signature preloaded onto every email so that it's just as quick as texting, but it is through like my university's like system. And then that way I just don't feel like I'm disrespecting my professor. I don't know. I feel like that's like the most effective way for me to do it, and like the most comfortable way as well for, I guess, both people. But I don't mind the texting either. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would also agree with Sam and Ashley. I think personally that it really doesn't even matter so much for me, like what line of communication use, as long as they're, using it often. So I have some professors who are great with using their email and are always emailing back like within a moment's notice. And then some professors who have everything set up, campfire, email, they have all these different ways to communicate, but never seem to actually like answer any questions in a timely fashion. So I would say probably email if I had to pick one, but it really depends on the professor and how punctual they are.
And I would like to piggyback on what Michael, Sema, Ashley, and Dale said, because like I think this we hit all levels. Different people like different types of communication, right? So we're kind of like hitting it up at all angles. And I noticed that it's one thing that I've gotten actually really good feedback from my students since the beginning of the pandemic, because I try my best to have all my email responses before 5 p.m. close of business. And that really reduces a lot of stress, because I mean, some of these matters are really time sensitive, and I can't tell you how many responses I got back. Oh, thank you, Professor Aguilar. It took a lot of stress off of me. And I just try every day. I'm just constantly checking it, and I'm trying to be fast with that response. And it usually it really has an overall positive effect on many matters, I think. So, but I mean, also Dale's thing, the text message really handles that too. Some students like text messaging, some like emails, but I think in reality, what Michael said, as long as it's fast, as long as it's not like a time delayed, you're getting some level of good customer service. That matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this goes back to controlling expectations. As Jacob just stated, he likes to respond by the end of the business day. And if he tells his students that, they can say, okay, my professor will respond to me by 5 p.m.
Yes.
And if he doesn't respond by 5 p.m., then maybe he'll respond to me the next day by 5 p.m. It sets an expectation.
Yes.
I told my summer class, I told my students, I'll usually respond within 24 hours, except for the weekend. So if they email me on the weekend, they don't expect a response. If I do respond to them on the weekend, then it's like, wow, because of that expectation set, oh, he went above and beyond, or he is there to help me, just like he said. His actions are meeting or are verifying his words. And I think, to be honest with you, it's just about access. As Emma said, she prefers email. It's fine. To me, email, discussion board, text, whatever works. Whatever works is what I'm going to provide access to. I'm a part of AMATIC, and it's an organization for American Mathematical Association for 2-year colleges. So there I learned about Flipgrid, and it's a dynamic discussion board where students can use video. If a student is using a smartphone and they have an app and they can respond in video to ask a question, if the instructor can actually get the students to engage in it early on, that can be a really quick way of communicating rather than email or text. But it doesn't really matter to me. It's just providing the student access and setting an expectation.
That's perfect. I mean, exactly like Dale said, it's about expectation, and like he pointed out on our end and the students' end. And in reality, the students are coming to the university. They're very busy. They're paying the tuition. They deserve a certain level of customer service. So we need to be have a fast return time with that too. And like Dale said, it's about access time. We need to be fast. I mean, 2-3 days for an email. I mean, it needs to be it should be in a timely fashion, I think.
And I think the expectation really helps people with that always on feeling, especially in online courses. You feel like you're always going to have to be available to students to answer their questions. But, you know, what you said, Dale, setting expectations as to when you'll answer and when you won't answer them so they know that you won't be available.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
So I know Dale and Jacob talked a little bit about, you know, how they incorporate activities to really open the door for communication with students. So I wanted to ask our students on the call here, was that resonating with you? I know they were mentioning a lot about, you know, creating activities and asking and trying to get to know their students. Have you seen your instructors do anything differently or other ways they can really make you feel comfortable in their course?
Something I also wanted to add onto that was I like when a professor has a set office hours, or they have the option of making an appointment with them for office hours, because like Dale said as well, when there's different expectations, it really helps the student understand, and it also allows the student to know when to email them, because if they say like, oh, I can't answer on the weekends, then they know already not to bother their professor, or not much bother, but email them during the weekends, you know. But I think office hours is really another option that helps students. Like as Sema also said that she only likes email. I'm sure there's some students that prefer in person, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Dee Dee just had a question that came in through Q&A. How many times a week do students want to hear from their instructors without it being too much? How much is too much?
So for me, last semester, I took 8 classes. So for me, my communication was like overload, so many emails a day, so many reminders, Slack messages. But something that really resonated with me was that one of my professors, the hardest class I took, it was accounting, and he would email us every single day at 9 a.m. So he would have it like scheduled. He would make it for every day. And that was the only form of communication he used. That's the only thing he did. And that way, like the instructors in this panel said, there was an expectation that every day at 9 a.m. I was going to have an email from my accounting professor. And to be honest, I didn't think it was too much at all. Some days he would tell us there won't be an email tomorrow because I've told you everything that you need to know for, you know, the next few days. And I think just constantly setting that expectation is good. If it is a class that isn't as heavy as maybe the accounting class I took, because it was my hardest one. For example, like an introductory English class, maybe only like 1 or 2 a week, just enough so that you know that your students have all the information they need within that one or couple of communication platforms.
Yeah, anything else to add to that?
I personally love like receiving communication whenever from my professors. I had one professor, he's actually the head of the econ department, and he would be pretty much awake all the time, 24 hours a day. We would get emails. Me and my friends would joke about it. We get emails from him at like 3 a.m, like constantly. And I would always just, you know, a lot of them were just him like talking about economics because he just loved econ so much. But I'm always on my computer, especially during the school year. I'm on my computer every single day. So the first thing I do in the morning, like during the school year, is check my email. So if I have, you know, it's just kind of nice to hear from your professor, just to know that they're, you know, thinking about you or thinking about their class and making sure that everyone's on the same page. So I personally don't feel like there's even a limit. I'd rather be just overloaded with emails, because as long as they're somewhat meaningful, you know, and not too much. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think something I did when I was in college too is keeping my student email only for classwork, because when I started signing up for Dunkin' Donuts and all of these different emails, it got way too like flooded. So keeping it to that too would really be helpful.
You know, one thing, Shona, I really think it also makes sense to kind of not just look at like a rigid dichotomy as like instructors and students. We're all just like, you know, professionals, you know, right? So nobody likes getting spammed by so many tons of emails. And if someone's sending you so many, an overload of emails every week, then they need to be more concise to that level of communication. Because like Sema was saying, it can just be completely overloaded. And it's related to what Dale said, the expectations, 9 a.m., like every Monday or whatever. That's perfect. That's solid. And you should be able to get it done in that amount of time. So,
yeah. So Thomas actually wrote in a comment that was really interesting. So I wanted to bring it up. So he agrees that instructors need to encourage student communication, but he wanted to bring up the point of a lot of times when we make it about, whatever the student prefers in their form of communication, maybe email versus chat, it makes it harder to prepare them for the real world in terms of, when they're going into a company, the company may have certain communication preferences. So do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you try to keep it like stringent on like, this is the way I'm going to communicate with you, or kind of make it a little more student choice?
I would be happy to comment on this. Personally, like I said, I love emailing with my professors. That's like the only thing I'll really do. But I am also a Cengage student ambassador. So I do use several different platforms. I think that, it's okay to have like a preference, but obviously it is dependent on the student to know, like, it's not always going to be about your opinion or your preference. And that's kind of a nice thing because as a Cengage student ambassador, I'm using so many different platforms from where I do my training, how I communicate with my coworkers, how I communicate with my managers. So I'm using over maybe like 4 different platforms. And that's just on, on my like small like level. I'm still pretty new to this role, but it hasn't been a problem for me just because I have that growth mindset. And I think that's kind of dependent on the student. So as long as the student knows, it's not going to always be through email or always through text, your communication really is going to be dependent on your different environments and how you adapt to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments on that?
So I think Thomas's point is poignant. I think it depends. So if you're in a finishing school or or students are training for a particular career, whether it's some type of terminal degree, it doesn't necessarily have to be a master's degree or a doctoral degree, but a degree that once they're done, they're going to be certified in something. In those type of programs, it is also important to talk to the students about what the workplace looks like. What kind of expectations the boss has. And when I say set expectations and providing students access, I think in general that providing students with access to communicate with me is important. During the pandemic, it's been exacerbated. So we have to adapt to that scenario. So, and not just education, jobs had to adapt to that scenario too. Many more people working from home, many more people incorporating Slack or different kinds of technologies that they didn't use before, or maybe had access to, but didn't leverage as much until they were forced to. Think about how often we use WebEx and Zoom and Skype and things of that nature. So I think it depends. But just because you set expectations and provide your students access doesn't mean that you can't also, as an educator, train them to understand what the real world looks like. For example, I say, when you're in school, unless you're studying for a particular type of degree where you have to be certified, you're learning how to learn. Oftentimes when your boss hires you, they read the resume, they interview you, and they say, okay, you look like you can learn this. Because there are many jobs where you can get tossed out in the ocean and it's just to see if you can swim or not. That's the point. That's how some people teach you. I've had teachers that will spoon feed you, and I've also had instructors that just tossed us out in the ocean, and I got to go grab a bunch of books that are 2 or 3 levels ahead of me just to understand what my teacher's talking about. And the point of that was my teacher wanted to know if I could swim. I think you can talk to your students about this and explain why. I even talk about their own jobs. How many times would you have a boss that doesn't necessarily know what they're asking you to do? They know it needs to be done, but they can't actually show you how to do it. They hired you because they believe you can do it, and you have to be able to swim. So I just think it depends on what kind of class you're talking about. And just because you provided students with more access to communicate with you doesn't mean that you can't speak about the kind of expectations that they're going to have when they enter the work world.
Yeah.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
I do think there needs to be expectations, and then also keeping in mind that everybody works differently. There are people who prefer meetings versus emails versus Slack or whatever communication form that you use. So it's kind of give some rigor, but also some flexibility as well. We did have a question coming from Diane. I think these are for the students. So I have had trouble with students building a habit of checking their email every day, or at least close up to every day. Any advice on what would help this? They've been missing out on important class information and reminders.
So I know that's for the students, but may I jump in?
Sure.
Maybe I'll put an answer to a quiz question in the email. Not all of the answers, but one. Something simple like that that gets the students in the habit of doing it. And when we do it is extremely important. So now this goes to adult learning theory. Some students are motivated enough to take our courses, but they might not be self-directed enough to take our courses. So we have to teach them how to do it. If us communicating with email is extremely important, then from day one, we need to show them that. And I would spend the first 2 weeks of class emphasizing that. And I would give them, hey guys, you guys have a quiz tomorrow. I'm going to email you the answer to the quiz, or for at least 2 questions to the quiz, but you need to check it, or some important information that they can get from, even if it's only 10% of the quiz. I guarantee that it's going to increase the percentage of students that are going to check the email. And once they get used to seeing that, oh, my professor's actually providing me with important information here, then that can increase the likelihood of them checking their email. But you have to build their habit. You have to model that behavior. And it goes back to adult learning theory. Students don't learn until there's a need to learn. Or adults don't learn, I should say, until there's a need to learn. It's not just in the education world, it's in the working world as well.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on to that. I completely agree with what Dale said, because I had a professor that before the class even started, he emailed us the syllabus. And inside of the syllabus, if you would have read it all, like he had a hidden extra credit thing that said, email me a picture of a dinosaur or something like that. And I remember I got really excited when I saw that. So I emailed it to him. And then like the first week of class started, and he told everyone, if you guys would have read my email, I had an extra credit hidden the thing in there. And then I believe that begins to have the students to start reading every email to find those little treasures,
That's awesome, Ashley. I might steal that. Thank you.
Yeah, that is awesome. And look, can I piggyback on what Dale and Ashley was saying? It's basically creating an incentive, right? So like, and that kind of motivates, and that's just how reality is, And I'll also make one comment if I could backtrack a little bit. So Sima has awesome taste because it's similar to mine. She prefers email, but it's also joking, but it's good to also have like multiple ways to communicate. So I've had success with my Instagram. A lot of students will just message me on there. It's very efficient. And also, when you really think about it, this is playing on what Dale said about the evolution and of communication. How we communicate now is not how we communicated like 5 years ago. And that's just exponentially increasing. So how students are going to go to the workforce and communicate like the next year, it's going to be wildly different than the next 5 years. So you just have to, it's what Dale and Sima were saying, you have to just use a lot of stuff, just be adaptable. And you have to be able to swim. That's pretty much it. The more stuff, the better, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not on IG, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm using IG to communicate with my students. And if I were on IG, I still wouldn't do it. However, I have seen other instructors from all over. They can use IG, they can use Twitter, and they use Twitter to send out reminders for examinations. Sometimes they use Twitter to send out solutions for their students, or we forget about YouTube, but YouTube is a social media platform, one of the biggest ones. So if you can actually not only post your videos, but get your students to communicate with each other on YouTube about the videos, that can be extremely helpful. So email is old technology, if we really think about it. So it's not that we can't use it, and it's not that it's not useful. It's just that we have other iterations that are more efficient, that students are using more right now. So sometimes we have to meet the students where they are. And I've seen a plethora of instructors use Twitter or IG. I can't say I've seen somebody use Snapchat, but I bet it's been done, to communicate with their students. Carefully, I hope.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So changing gears a little bit, I wanted to go to some of the questions that were submitted with the different registrations. So one of them that came up was about student readiness. So knowing that the pandemic's caused a lot of interrupted learning, which has resulted in underprepared students. Going into fall, how do you plan to address prerequisite skills in your course? This is for our faculty.
Wow. If I could say something, I know Dale and I are really feeling that one because we teach math, and that's like a building block thing. It's kind of consistent with the accounting course Emma was saying. So I have like remedial kind of like, that's what WebAssign is actually very useful for. And I'm pretty sure Dale uses WebAssign too. You can have these remedial kind of like blocks, right? So before we're teaching a certain topic, you can assign students this asynchronous remedial block. They can complete it, and it maybe covers some basic ingredients they need to solve the problems. And it's better for the students, and it's better for the whole flow of the class, because we have to address it. We can't just assume that the students know the previous class perfectly. It's a lot of heterogeneity in the classroom. And that, so, I mean, I found remedial kind of stuff is really efficient. And that's why WebAssign is really useful for that too, because if you have a certain book that you're using, it has all these free tutorials. You can just draw all these different problems and just build these remedial courses, or just these remedial little modules, and everyone kind of likes that. So,
just to continue on what Jacob's saying, so I definitely leverage WebAssign, not just the textbook. For example, in my calculus, I use Lawson. So Lawson comes with a plethora of resources, whether you're talking about the lecture videos or the PowerPoints. But even beyond that, WebAssign has a lot of free resources. So we have calculus readiness boot camps, free calculus readiness boot camps. So simply adding that to my course and giving my students access. But it's not enough to give my students access. Throughout this presentation or this panel, you've heard me emphasize modeling the behavior. So at the beginning of the semester, I can't just tell my students this is there. I have to show them, hey, here are the personal study plans. Here are the additional resources that I gave you access to. If you are struggling with something, this is where you should go. This is where you can get help. Okay, after the first week, I talk about class insights. Everybody take a moment to look at class insights. Okay, you see what you're struggling on. Now that personal study plan that I told you about on day one is something that you can leverage. And something relatively new this year is the Learnits. So I've taught on WebAssign since 2009. It's been a long time. So for most of my courses, I already have them created. I already have all of my assignments. Even if there's an addition update, the system can update it automatically with the new questions. But the Learnits are so valuable because it's scaffolding the students' learning. I told you that sometimes students are motivated enough, but they're not self-directed enough, because in college, this is a process of helping them become more self-directed. They're not supposed to be self-directed enough. They're learning. The Learnits gives them what they need in a scaffolded manner to help them. So my old assignments or my courses from years ago didn't have the Learnits in them because the Learnits didn't exist. Now that the Learnits do exist, I actually change my assignments. And it takes a lot for me to change my assignments. But I've started to change my assignments and incorporate one or two of the Learnits at the beginning of the assignments, just to deal with some of that prerequisite knowledge that they're supposed to know, but oftentimes they don't. And by incorporating the Learnits into my already built assignments, it's changed the conversation. It's made it much easier for my students to identify what they struggle with. They can go down the Learnit rabbit hole, but the scaffolded rabbit hole, and they can work on what they need to. So that's been extremely helpful. So there are a lot of free resources that are in WebAssign that can be leveraged to help our students.
oh yeah.
Absolutely. We do have a scaffolding session tomorrow. If anyone's interested in it, Taylor can drop the link in the chat. That digs really into that. But keeping in mind, I know one of the challenges with prerequisite skills is sometimes people just don't have the time to go, dig deep into all those prerequisite skills for their course. So a lot of times, like you mentioned, Dale, you show your students the resources like the personal study plan or other places. But I think one of the challenges there is, when you don't require it, students are less incentivized to do it. So I wanted to hear from the students a little bit, when you're getting these optional resources, things that will help you refresh your skills, what really gets you to actually do it without requiring it?
So I remember when I had my math course in WebAssign, we did have the option to in each question, I was able to read a section. If you press a button, I believe it said learn it, and then there was a watch it. And it provided a video of that exact question, but different numbers, and it like switched the numbers a bit. And that really helped me refresh my mind and better understand the question. Or it also had the option of reading a section of the book that included how you worked that through that question. So I thought that helped me with refreshing my mind on the question.
So kind of giving you the resources when you need it.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
If I can mention what Ashley said, I mean, in my experience with the remedial stuff, I always like giving an incentive because it still is extra work that students have to do. And they're not just taking my course, I realize they're taking multiple other courses. So I've had much better results if I always give like it's for a grade and just keep it like that. And then I get much more engagement with it. And in the end, it works out better because students are doing it. It kind of brushes off all the rough edges, and then they perform better on like the course material. So
I also think that our students want to perform.
yes.
Many students, they want to do well in class. Some of them believe they can't, but the desire to want to do it is there. And even some of the students that say they just want to pass in grade, they still want to succeed. They still want to pass the class. And that's where making sure that they see their grades. That's where using the grade book effectively is important. Incorporate not just the assignments that you have on WebAssign. Most of my assignments are on WebAssign, but you heard me earlier say that I use Kahoot. I want them to track some of the extra credit that they get for Kahoot. I don't want them to just say, oh, well, he said he's going to give us extra credit. When is it going to occur? No, you see me put it in Kahoot. I use, just for the instructor, I just use a dummy assignment. I track their attendance in WebAssign. I track different things that they're working on in WebAssign. If there's a lab, I'll put the lab scores in WebAssign. By making sure that my grade book is where the students can see the past through assignments, the ability to track their grades real time, that real time progress report enables your students to, it encourages the students that are already doing well. And for those that are not doing as well, it serves as an indication, hey, I need to change my activity. Hey, I need to change my approach. Or to speak in instructor language, it helps them to self-regulate their learning. So I think having constant progress reports about how your students are performing, that is going to allow them to engage in self-regulated learning. And then once your student is ready to regulate their learning, ready to change their approach, you have to build it into the system. I allow my students to have extensions on the majority of the assignments, not on an examination, not on a time. If it's a time quiz, they're gonna have to reach out to me. On a take-home quiz, sure, you can have an automatic extension even. But if I don't allow my students to have the extensions, then how can my students regulate their learning? How can they change? I have to build it. I have to create a course with grace and build it into it so that my students, when they're ready to change, they have the ability to do so.
Oh, that is perfect, Dale. Let me just continue on that. Flexibility is really our only advantage in this whole entire situation. Like what Dale was saying, the self-regulating, it ties into the instant feedback of the grades. I mean, it's kind of like our duty as an instructor. I mean, students should expect it to have fast grade turnaround time, fast communication time, whether it's email, text, or whatever. I mean, those are the main ingredients of a really well-run course. And students, that's how it should be. So exactly what Dale said. Otherwise, how could they self-regulate if they're not getting their grades back fast, if they're not getting communication? It's nearly impossible. They have no feedback.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to have feedback in the time that they're taking this quiz or taking the homework assignment and really getting them in real time.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah, so kind of jumping a little bit further, I know we've talked a lot about students refreshing their prerequisite skills and, really working on learning. But we all know that, when it comes to quizzes and exams, sometimes that fear of cheating is a common challenge for instructors. So I did want to ask the students a little bit. I know cheating is probably something that comes up in a lot of your courses. So as a student, how do you recommend instructors reduce cheating?
I think one thing that is really effective is handing out different, going through the extra work to actually have different type of exams. While it might be on the same kind of material, it's very difficult when you have a lecture room full of 150 students, sometimes 200 students. And if they're all sitting next to each other, no matter how many proctors there are, it's just so difficult to make sure that they're not looking at each other's paper and communicating with each other. It's really hard to prevent. And I think the most effective way, especially, is multiple types of exams while it's on the same material. If there's a version A, B, and C, and you spread it out throughout the lecture hall, I think that's far and away the most effective way to reduce cheating in an exam setting, at least.
Yeah, having different versions is definitely helpful.
Yeah, and if it's like a math course, I would say making sure they provide the work for it, not just the answer, because that would just show that they actually worked out the question and not just found the answer in an unknown way.
Allegedly unknown, right, Ashley?
Yes.
So something that I had a math professor, my calculus professor, do last semester, which was probably it was very challenging for me coming out of being online for so long, was that it was an all-in-person class. She did record every class. However, for all exams, it had to be on person and it had to be on the one day that everyone was examined. And if you couldn't attend because you were sick, she would pull up a Zoom and watch you take it. But something that she did, and it was all paper, no multiple choice. It was all open response, only 5 questions long for 20% of my grade. But it was super challenging and super fun because she would send us a review test or a practice test a couple weeks before the actual exam. And at least 4 out of the 5 questions were very, very similar, just different numbers. And maybe instead of a whole number, it was a fraction, or instead of a decimal, it was an improper number. But that way I was trained to actually know how to solve each 5 of those questions. And going into the exam, I was allowed to have a sticky note. So for the one question I might not have known how to do, I could write down how I should solve it. And even though that is, it's not cheating because she allowed it, it does kind of satisfy some of students' needs to have a sense of knowing, because there's a bunch of people who could just find the answers online or from a friend even. But actually knowing how to solve it yourself, that's what the teacher at the end of the day wants. So that way you're actually you're still learning how to do it. And to this day, I think I could totally take another one of her exams and know how to do it all, just because I spent so much time memorizing how to do her practice exams.
I love that, an effective practice exam. And I have had that sticky approach before for other classes outside of math. I think many people on this call are probably thinking, oh no, open response exams and having to grade all of them would probably take a lot of time. But if they're only 5 questions, that would be much more helpful.
And look, I want to clarify something too, what Sim was saying. I'm almost certain that there was no magnifying glass that was allowed with a sticky note, right? So you could write like 3 pages on it, right? Of formulas, right? They're just a sticky note. That's fine, right?
There are the people who get the biggest sticky note possible.
But I think as an instructor, we have to, Jacob talked about accepting reality. Cheating is a reality. It's always been a reality in education. It's always going to occur. No matter how sophisticated your system is, there's going to be somebody that's going to find a way around it. All we can do is mitigate. All we can do is reduce the risk of cheating. And and I think that's twofold. You talked about, Michael was talking about different versions of examinations. And we know that through WebAssign, we can, or Courseware, we can do that. Ashley was talking about showing the handwritten work. I make that a requirement on all of my exams. I teach my students how to use Cam Scanner or Genius Scan, take pictures of their work, upload one PDF. I emphasize one PDF. I'm not going through a bunch of them, but and they will do the work. But another thing is, some of the students really do want to learn. They know that they're going to be taking another course, and it's not just okay to do well on the course but not understand it, because maybe I'm in business and I'm going to need to be able to apply this, or maybe I'm in Calc 1 and I need to take Calc 2 and Calc 3. And if I don't understand what's going on in Calc 1, how am I going to perform in Calc 2 or Calc 3? I know students that can get the answer right because they've memorized the process of, or they can guess what the answer is because they memorized the format of the answer, but they'll still come to me, Professor, I really don't understand. Please help me. And talking to your students about how important it is to understand, especially depending on what their major is or what their desired goal is afterwards, that can help it too. And so again, you can't eliminate it completely, but when you encourage your students to have that desire to truly understand, to be able to perform in the future in whatever their endeavors will be, that helps. And then you just put the other mitigating circumstances, whether you're using lockdown browser, whether you're requiring them to provide their handwritten work. Someone talked about the practice exams. I love giving practice exams. I tell my students, I'm not trying to trick you. The test is going to look like the practice exam. It's not exactly going to be the same. There are going to be problems you've never seen before, but you should be able to approach them if you've done the practice exam. I'm not trying to trick you. If you know how to do it, then you should be able to perform on the test. That's that simple.
Yeah.
Can I say this, Shauna? What Dale said
Sure.
beautifully transitions into like the workplace readiness that everyone was talking about. Like Dale was saying, in mathematics, at least, it's way more available to know how to solve a problem, a method, than just to kind of like manipulate symbols and get something. And so when students go to their job and they're faced with this stuff they've never encountered before, just that mode of thinking, like Dale was saying, what do these universities really prepare you for? How to think? They're more prepared.
Yeah, I remember, and I don't want to take too much time, but one of my favorite professors in undergrad, his name was Dr. Chow, and he told us, most of you won't work in mathematics. And he was right. Even before I became a math professor, I wasn't technically working in mathematics. I was in the industry. And he said, but I'm teaching you, what is it? Why is it so? How is it so? And if you can approach the questions in that way, then there's no problem in the real world that you can't handle, And he was, again, teaching us how to think. When the bosses hire you, sometimes they don't know how to do your job. They hire you because you sound like you know how to do your job, or because you can learn how to do your job, because they're moving into something new. So we're really teaching our students how to think. And that's extremely important here.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I
So Diane actually, oh, no, go ahead, Ashley.
Sorry, I just wanted to add what Sema said earlier. I really appreciated review sessions as well. So maybe like just having a review session where students could ask questions and adding back to like a little class discussion to really incorporate all the students and have them have just a little review session so that they could feel more comfortable when the exam comes.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. So we did have a question come in from Diane, and she wanted to know about proctoring. This is specifically for the students. Have any of these students experienced digital proctoring like Respondus or ProtoTrack? I've never heard of that. And what are your thoughts about the effectiveness or your experience on this?
Yes, I've used the Respondus lockdown browser. I liked it. I think it's a good way of preventing cheating. It made me a little nervous because the camera's on the whole time. And you also sometimes they had technical difficulties, as in like having to record your room and stuff. But I do think it's a good way of preventing cheating.
I will say that I also use Respondus lockdown browser, and I only used it when I was dual enrolled at a community college. So now that I'm at like a 4-year school, a public university, I have not had to use anything like that. But I feel like I'm working probably twice as hard here. And I think I'm learning more than when I did when I was dual enrolled at the community college. And the professors who did offer the Respondus lockdown browser, I didn't connect with as well, just because I kind of felt like, it kind of takes away from the personalization of your professor. Like now I feel like, oh, like they're going to be watching me. And also I'm a type of person, I just feel like when there's like a camera on me, I'm like staring at it the whole time, like during my exam. I also like to like talk like a lot. Like I'll like talk to myself like through problems, like if I'm taking an exam at home. So I'll be like, oh, like A plus B, and I'm like because the camera's like watching me. Oh, my professor probably thinks I'm like kind of weird. So all those things going through my mind while I'm taking a proctored time exam just always made me perform a little bit less than I wanted to. And I'd always like, whenever I was like logging off, I would just feel like my heart was racing. So I did lose a little bit of respect for that class whenever I did have to do that. So I personally wouldn't recommend it. Sure, it didn't, it keeps you from cheating, but I have heard of ways that they like you can cheat with it. Like a lot of people put sticky notes all around their computer. They put it on the back of their computer. Like students will find a way to do it. And I know so many people who have done that. So although it is an effective way for some students, I think that the students who really, really do want to cheat and most often will cheat will still be able to find a way. So if you care about kind of like the personalization with your students, I would maybe reconsider using the lockdown browser because I don't know. I think I'm a pretty high functioning student and I did not like it at all. So I think it's definitely up to the professor and their class and what you think is best for you.
I agree with what Sima said. It's easily hackable. And also, like, I know just for me, if I'm just doing research or whatever, I don't want my camera on someone watching me the whole time. I need to be focused in my own space. So I'm kind of in 100% agreement with Sima on this one. Like, I mean, it's easily hackable. It's almost like a false sense of security. Are you really preventing cheating? Or are you also kind of dampening your students like Sima who would do much better, but it just creates a more stressful environment anyway. And with math, that's like a bad combination. So.
If I may, I think it depends. If I'm teaching a small classroom versus if I'm a coordinator and I'm managing 230 sections, or I'm in charge of testing. But there's ways to mitigate it. So that feeling that Summer was talking about, it is a real feeling. But if you notice, when you go to take even professional examinations, they give you practices first. So you can practice being in the environment. So you can practice being in a time environment. I have trial examinations. The first time my students used lockdown browser, it's not on the test. They used it in the trial examination. The first time they saw the timer was in the trial examination. The first time they practiced uploading was in the trial examination. If you can make them more comfortable, it can mitigate some of those feelings. Not eliminate, but at least mitigating to do some of those feelings that Sam described.
Yeah, I agree. So we are running out of time. So I got one last question for all of you before we close out. So as we move into fall semester, for the students, what do you wish your instructors would know? And for the instructors, what do you wish your students would know?
Well, I'll start off like this, and I'll just say I wish my students would know that, hey, I value their time. Just I don't think it's some rigid like dichotomy. I know that they're overextended. They're asked to do more and more with less and less. And it's just we're all in this together. And let's just be flexible and work together to accomplish the goal. Like Dale was saying, all students want to do well. No student takes a course saying, I'm paying for this, I want to get an F. That's just not the reality, regardless if they want to know the material or not. So the message I would want them to know is we're all in this together and let's work as a team just to get through this.
Thank you. Dale?
For me, that I care about my students, that I want them to succeed. I want them to excel, but I also respect their autonomy. Every student has the right to pass. Every student has the right to fail. I'm going to put you in a position to pass. I'm going to encourage you to excel. But at the end of the day, at least in my classes, they're going to have to put in the work. As long as they put in the work, they can pass. But you have to put in the work. It's a sense of accountability. I'm going to do my part. I'll do everything I can to help you. I will drag you over the finish line if I have to, no matter what. But I need to see that you're putting in the effort too, that it's not one-sided. And if we both put in the effort, then you can succeed. Exactly.
Oh, great. Michael?
Yeah, I think I would like my professors just to know that, and this is kind of what Jacob was saying. I feel like it's one team. We're at a 4-year university, paying for it. And it's one of those things like, I don't feel like a lot of, I'll just use high school for an example. A lot of kids just don't want to be there. They have to be there because, they just have to be there. I mean, we're all there by choice, professors, students alike. And I feel like it's, a kind of a collaborative thing. The more I feel like I'm on the same team as my professor, the better I tend to do. So I guess it's one of those things like I want to have that relationship with my professor more than just, okay, I go to your class, I see you for X amount of time per week and that's it. And I have to do your work. I like it to be more kind of a collaborative thing. And I think I speak on behalf of most students when, especially at universities, that we want to kind of have that relationship and go through the course that way.
Ashley?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Michael said. I think being more interactive, I wish my professors knew that I personally learn better when the professor interacts with the whole class instead of just having a monotone lecture. I only had one professor that was like that, and I could not learn. It was a terrible semester for me because that's all he did. He just got up there and lectured and did not speak to the students at all. So it was really hard for me to learn that way. I also wish they knew that this is for some professors, because I know a lot of professors understand this, but some professors understand that we have other classes that require more or the same amount of work that they are providing.
Summer?
One thing I would want all my professors to know is that I always appreciate them. I think some professors might be a little intimidated by having, so many students. I know a lot of my classes had over 200 people. At the end of the day, I'm kind of a people pleaser. I love to get a good grade and just show my appreciation to my professor. I love saying have a good day as I walk out the door. So at the end of the day, even if your student isn't saying anything to you, I know that whenever I make friends in other classes or sit next to different people, we always are oh, that was sweet, or under our breath we'll be oh, that was cool that they did that. There's always a mutual appreciation for you guys, just because teachers in general, you're shaping who we are. I feel every semester I'm just a new version of me, and you guys influence so much of that because we spend so much time with you. So at the end of the day, I'll always say thank you to you guys, even if you do something that's hard to adapt to or something like that. At the end of the day, I'm still learning from you guys, and we all appreciate you. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for joining today. This has been a really great conversation. And thank you to everyone who's joining. Please feel free to join our other sessions. We have a great one this afternoon about WebAssign improvements that are coming this fall, one about scaffolding and exams and testing. So a lot of great things to come. So hope to see you on another one. Thank you.